Hi there, and welcome to another episode of RTD News Updates. And so, as you can tell from today's title, Zimbabwe Cash Crisis Worsens, we're going to be spending some time on the current and ongoing crisis happening in Zimbabwe right now, as their currency or their reissuance of a newer type of currency seems to be failing, as well as this gentleman right here over my shoulder here, Mr. Robert Mugabe, their president slash prime minister, a gentleman who's been in power for close to or around 40 years or so. And he has no ambition or desire to leave office, even though he's apparently very ill. So before we actually get into today's articles, I want to share with you a couple of things. And so those that may be new to rethinking a dollar, I formulated a new type of way of understanding the concept of money and things like that with a infographic called Dollarcation. And so the link for that will be below. But it's just a small and informative, detailed way of studying our nation's history, especially around our monetary source. And then also, to really fully, truly understand what's happening in Zimbabwe over the last several years, I actually had an interview with a Zimbabwe economist, Mr. John Robertson, who's a very well-respected man there in Harare. And so I'll post a link for that video as well below, so you can get a much more detailed and thorough breakdown of what's happening in Zimbabwe, being that he is a citizen and lived there his entire life. So, and also just in speaking with him, kind of, touched my heart to hear about his struggles, being that he is retired, and he retired, close to 20 years ago, but he had to come out of retirement because his pension and everything like that he thought was his was no longer there. So it's a touching story. But before we move any further, I want to just also mention to you, if you ever have any questions or concerns or any other issues or reports or anything happening globally that may not be covered, feel free to share that with me, and I'll do some research on it and try to, process it and package together to share with the Rethinking It Out audience. So without further ado, let's get into today's articles. So here I have about 6 articles, but I want to actually start off with giving you a little bit of information on Robert Mugabe according to Wikipedia. And so I'll just thumb through it briefly, but it says Robert Mugabe, born February 21st, 1924, a Zimbabwean revolutionary and politician who has governed the Republic of Zimbabwe as president since 1987 and had previously governed as prime minister from 1980 to 1987. Ideologically an African nationalist and socialist, he has led the Zimbabwean African National Union Party since 1975. And then to scroll down a little bit further, give you a little more details about him. It says, having dominated Zimbabwe politics for nearly four decades, Mugabe has been a controversial and divisive figure. He has been praised as a revolutionary hero of the American African liberation struggle, who helped to free Zimbabwe from British colonialism, imperialism, and white minority rule. Conversely, critics view him as a dictator responsible for economic mismanagement and widespread corruption, whose regime has perpetrated anti-white racial discrimination, anti-white racial discrimination, anti-white racial discrimination, anti-white racial discrimination, human rights abuses, and criminal crimes against humanity. So that's just a little rough update on who he is. And of course, if you're interested, more information down below. Next, for actual articles from Daily News, and the Zim Cash Crisis Worsens. This is just something that came out a couple hours ago. Next article here is from CNN Money, and it's actually a nice little video, but it's Zimbabwe adds yet another currency. Next article is from Financial Times, and it says Zimbabwe is starting a currency chaos again. Next article here is from Newsday. It says bond notes not solution to Zim's problems, and that's the new issues of their currency that they revealed a couple months ago. Next article here is from All Africa. It says Zimbabwe multi-tier pricing model illegal. And then the final article here is from the News 24, and it says Zim Central Bank urges public to use South African Rand. And so it's more on that. So it's interesting there. So let's dive into the very first article. And as always, I'll leave a brief description down below for you to dive into it further if you're interested. And so first one here, just to thumb through it, actually a couple hours old. Zim Cash Crisis Worsens. It says, this is coming from Harare. The capital there. It says Zimbabwe's severe cash crisis is worsening, forcing banks to reduce further their daily withdrawal limits. In addition to suspending dispensing money through automated teller machines, This prompted analysts who spoke to Daily News yesterday to say that this confirmed that the local economy was dying and hurling towards total collapse. So it also comes that most banks are now dispersing a maximum of $30 a day, down from their usual $100. While those that cap the maximum withdrawal limit to $500 a week have pulled back to about $200. So cash is tight there. So they're dropping the limits. It looks like daily, which is signs of a crisis. Go a little further. It says the cash shortages are also continuing to worsen despite the recent opening of tobacco marketing season, where more than 47 million worth of leaf has so far been sold. Economic advisor to President Robert Mugabe told the Daily News yesterday that the escalating cash crisis was a result of long-term problems that came after the country opted to have one of the world's strongest currencies, the U.S. dollar, as its anchor currency. And so there, Mugabe, or the representative for Mugabe, is saying that the crisis is a long-term problem, and it has something to do with the U.S. dollar. Interesting. It says we are close to 6.5 billion in deposits, and at the end of January we will have a little over 300 million in cash circulating. Under such circumstances, it only makes sense that we have shortages. Do not blame the banks. It is not their fault. They are only looking for a coping mechanism. He recommended that the government should adopt the South African rand and ditch the dollar. So here we have another country who's having economic problems, monetary problems, and it goes well beyond their economy. There's a social aspect behind it as well, and as well as political. But he says he recommended that the government should adopt the South African rand and ditch the dollar. So here we have another country that's hinting at ditching the dollar. And so they want to ditch the dollar because it's too strong, and it's making other currencies, it's exposing the problems with other currencies, being that nobody really wants a local Zimbabwe dollar. So it's more to this article if you're interested to read below, but yet just another sign of, even Zimbabwe in the midst of a crisis, their president is telling them to basically rethink the dollar as well. So interesting article if you're interested, more down below. The next article here is from CNN Money, and it's actually came out November of 2016. It says Zimbabwe adds yet another currency, and so this actually gives some details along with the video about things as they were building up to the current event of issuing a new what they call bond note, a bond note which is supposed to be pegged to the dollar or a bond type substitute of the dollar. And they issued them in small increments of, I think, a $2 note or whatnot. And so apparently that was supposed to ease the cash crisis that was beginning to unfold as of last summer and head into the fall. So I don't think it quite worked out that well. So just to give you an idea what this article talks about here, it says it's called a dollar and worth a dollar, at least for now, but it has nothing to do with the U.S. Federal Reserve. It says Zimbabwe has issued so-called bond notes in bid to ease the chronic shortage of cash. The South African country has been using a mix of different currencies, and most importantly, the U.S. dollar, since its own Zimbabwe dollar, which is what President Mugabe's holding. He's holding actually a $100 trillion note. And so just a little side note, most people in the developed world, strive to want to be millionaires, whereas in Zimbabwe, they were actually millionaires, billionaires, and even got to trillionaires. So it was a lot of people walking around as trillionaires, but yet what's the point in having a trillion, a million, or a billion if it doesn't purchase much? So just a little play on words there, but you get the idea, I'm sure. It says, but the collapse of the economy has meant people have to buy almost everything from the bottled water to toothpicks from abroad. And that means cash is constantly pouring out of the country. It says Zimbabwe began stocking ATMs on Monday, as I mentioned, this is from last November, with the new bond notes in denomination of $2 and $5. They are not legal tenders outside of Zimbabwe. The idea is that the notes are used for local transactions, preserving scarce U.S. dollars and other currencies, such as the South African rand, to spend on imports. So even at that point, they were encouraging using the South African rand, which is a currency that's not really doing too good in and of itself, but yet they want to use that one. So here's a guy holding a $2 note. So there's more information below on that Zimbabwe bond note. If you're interested in reading about it, feel free to scroll down below. Here we have from Financial Times, Zimbabwe is staring at a currency chaos again. So it's more information on what's happening. But this one kind of talks about, over the decade from hyperinflation, signs grow of another economic meltdown. So just, more playing into the idea of shortages of daily necessities for the citizens there. It says celebrating his 93rd birthday on Saturday, a lavish party in the Matabo Hills near President Mugabe made it clear he is going nowhere. and intends to fight next year's presidential election. So presidential election is probably sometime in this season right here, but yet he plans on fighting. And so if as a person who's been in office for 40 years and your people are struggling, you would usually think that it's time to remove yourself and put someone in place that could probably do a better job. But it doesn't seem like the best interest of his people is his primary concern. It says the front runner to succeed, Vice President Emerson, promised his continued support, pledging that the ZANU-PF party will rule forever. So here we have the word will rule forever, which are all indications of dictatorship / socialism / everything that causes nations to fall and to fail. So here we have many Zimbabweans, especially business people, hope, but did not expect that after 37 years in office, the president would signal his intention to step down. They fear the economic consequences of a continued leaderless drift as the country faces its most severe economic challenges since the dollarization in 2009. So dollarization meaning that when their currency failed in 2009 from having, the $100 trillion note, they adopted the dollar or Federal Reserve note as their currency. And since that time, it's failing them as well because it's gained its purchasing power, making everything in their country coming in very, very expensive, and not too many people can afford it. So it says, which put an end to a decade during which the per capita incomes halved. So it will go on and give you more information onto that Zimbabwean crisis that's been going on for quite a while now. And so if you're interested, feel free to read down below. Next article from Newsday, it says, bond notes not solution to Zim's problem. And so this has to do with the whole issue of a newer currency in the form of paper that's only used internally that even the citizens don't really want. It says, speaking at a review bonds after 100 days in circulation, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe deputy governor said there was need to create a conducive working environment. Our solutions and our challenges are not going to be solved by bond notes, but the solutions are in the factories. So we need to be productive and we need to be competitive and so forth. We need to create a conducive environment for all of us to operate. We need to keep the confidence with the bond notes in existence by not printing too much. That every bond note is backed by the 200 million Africa Export and Import Bank loan. So they borrowed $200 million to put in a reserve to then issue off of those notes saying that they're backed by that money that's, in the bank that we owe to somebody else as well. So yeah, interesting concept. They borrow to then print, but then owe back. Yeah. Whew. That's a lot. It says, I think the bond notes are working in the areas we expected them to, but they are not final solutions to the problems that we are facing. The companies in the factory need to produce. Looking at policy making with the Office of the President and Cabinet, which is currently working on 100-day rapid results. It says bond notes were introduced on November 28th under the export incentive scheme guaranteed by the Afrexim Bank. He said the bond notes have provided liquidity in the economy, but foreign currency shortages were affecting the economy. So once again, we have a gentleman up here who actually is the governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, trying to point the blame everywhere outside of their institution of basically issuing paper with the stamp by the government. So you have a central bank that's failing the people. You have a government in the form of this gentleman right here who appears to be someone who hasn't done a good job of leading his country. On to the next article here. We have from All Africa. It says Zimbabwe multi-tier pricing model illegal, according to the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. It says retailers who are using a multi-tier pricing system for different payment systems are violating the Bank Use Promotion Act and risk the full wrath of law. A senior Reserve Bank official has said. Reserve Bank Zimbabwe Deputy Governor Dr. Malabo told a breakfast meeting held in Harare yesterday to discuss the implications and effect of the bond notes on the economy that the multi-tier pricing was unlawful. He said that the practice, which has become rampant following an increase in the amount of bond notes in circulation amid growing shortage of U.S. dollar notes, has spawned 3 price models for U.S. dollar notes, bond notes, and the use of electronic platforms. The illegal practice by some of the retailers come against the backdrop of acute shortage of the U.S. dollar notes, the most dominant transaction currency in the country, a multi-currency system. Zimbabwe uses a basket of foreign currencies after it scrapped its inflation-ravaged domestic currency in 2009, following a decade of economic instability which decimated 50% of the economy. It says under a U.S. dollar-dominated multi-currency system, inflation hit record lows, dropping well below zero and continuing like for 29 months before creeping out of the negative territory only last February. It says, I am aware of illegal activities that are happening. Some of the retailers have a three-tier pricing system for bonds, swiping, and U.S. dollar. I want to be very, very clear about this. It is illegal. So here we have a government official or a central bank official, governor, mentioning how the fact that, you have on the consumer end or the business side of things, because the economy is so bad, if you're in business to make money, to survive and to make a profit, you don't have time to gamble with all types of different currencies. You take what tends to be the strongest, and anything that's not strong, you probably put a little premium on top of that. And so if the US dollar is a globally accepted currency there, most people, who would want to receive that, being that it is the safest out of all of them. And so those bond notes and anything else is kind of suspect. So it's only natural to want to hold on to the Federal Reserve note temporarily, being that it's stable within their country, and exchange all the other stuff around and then put a premium or a price target on that, so that people got to pay a little bit more if they especially taking a risk in acquiring some other type of currency. So interesting there. If you're interested in reading more, feel free to do so. So last article here is from News 24. It says Zim Central Bank urges public to use South African Rand more. So this is basically a way of saying that even the Zimbabwe central bank is saying we don't want to use the Federal Reserve note anymore because there's not enough to go around. And so let's lesson on that a little bit and use the country's currency below us, which is South Africa. So here's a little information from there. It says Zimbabwe Central Bank has reportedly urged the public to replace the U.S. dollar with the rand as the country's main currency. So they're basically saying let's not use the dollar. So they are in the form rethinking the dollar as well. It says according to NewZimbabwe.com, Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe deputy governor said that they were going to be content if the public uses the South African rand more than the U.S. dollar. Remarks came as cash shortages in the southern African country continued to bite. Zimbabwe introduced its own surgical currency, dubbed the bond note, last year, but the move has failed to address the cash problem. He says, we will be happy in the central bank if people use the rand more than they would use any other currencies. We can benchmark pricing with the rand, which we can't do with other currencies such as the dollar, because we trade almost nothing with the U.S. So they never receive enough Federal Reserve notes into their country to kind of counterbalance that off. So they're always receiving these notes, but nothing's going out, and it just weakens their currency drastically. So this is what's happening in Zimbabwe with the Zimbabwe economy there. And so I wanted to just put this together because one of the viewers mentioned that, I should try to touch on the Zimbabwe. So I thought I would do some research and share with you guys. But it's another situation of a currency that is failing its people. People are up in ends about not knowing what to do because they have no monetary awareness or any type of options whatsoever. So they are struggling. And so just more signs of a failed policy that only comes back to hurt the people. So, and if you found it informative, please share this video with others so they can see what's going on outside of their own world. And then also, if you're new to RTD, click the subscribe button to bring you more interviews as well as news updates. Enjoy your day.